Welcome to the Chase Medsearch podcast, the place where we dive deep into the medical device sales industry by discussing the current trends, timeless philosophies, and amazing experiences that shape our niche of the industry. Join me, Jordan Chase, on a guided tour as I speak with established sales leaders and professionals as they share stories that will help you get in, stay in, and thrive in your medical device sales career. Let's start the show. Welcome back to the Chase Medsearch podcast. This is the first one for 2024. Excited to be back. Going to try to keep these rolling consistently in the new year, and we're kicking it off great with a returning guest, Scott Platoff, who is a recruiter extraordinaire. His energy brings and insights just absolutely incredible. Scott's been in the recruiting business for quite a while, longer than I have with, Scott, what do you got? 2 decades of experience doing this? Closing in on 3 decades?
This new year, you're making me feel my age. This is my third time returning champion, I guess.
Yeah.
And I've been in the executive search world, specifically medical device and biotech and pharma, for over 20 years now. So
there you go.
I guess I feel good and bad about that all at once.
Well, you should feel good because I know the candidates I send your way, they always have a good experience. Obviously, I worked with you before from a recruiting partnership standpoint when I was at Medtronic as an internal TA person. And now out on my own last 12 years, I always appreciate your advice when we work through various situations. So it's great to have you on. Great to have you back. How was your New Year celebration?
It was awesome. We didn't have to travel, and we got to enjoy the nice temperate weather here in South Florida this time of the year. Got to use the fireplace twice, even once it goes below 50 degrees. We put the fireplace on, even though people that live where you used to live in Minnesota probably are turning this off right now when they hear that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They don't want to hear anything about balmy, moderate climates right now up there, I don't think. We've been cold and wet here in Texas and even down here in San Antonio. So I could have used a fireplace the past few days. So anyways, well, we're in 2024, a lot going on.
Yes.
Things are happening in the recruiting world and the med tech industry, all kinds of stuff going on. In terms of getting it going, quick hit on the candidate marketplace, what to expect from us as recruiters. You know, if you're a candidate out there in the market looking, when you pop us a resume out of the blue or you get referred to us and reach out, let's talk a little bit about that.
Sounds good.
Because people are thinking about that this time of year.
Yeah. And I think just from a level setting perspective, we're talking from the point of view of within, for argument's sake, the med tech space, medical device industry, perhaps diagnostics and broader life sciences, but to make it simple, perhaps focusing on med tech and medical device. And from a candidate marketplace standpoint, some of the functions within the medtech space are really still, I feel, in flux, in that we have to get used to the fact that there's more candidates out and about in the market and looking for opportunities than there ever has been before. I know you and I have talked about this offline, and there's just a big reset that's going on in the space right now. And just to be completely frank, there are less jobs out there, specifically as it relates to the commercial functions like sales and marketing and product management. Companies have absolutely reduced the number of seats in those functions. And with that comes that candidate sort of surplus that I mentioned before, which is something that you and I probably really haven't seen historically in our careers.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true, especially when you think of the sort of what maybe we used to call blue chip firms. You know, there are some of the titans, some of the giants that are reducing seats, that are trimming entire sales forces, ending divisions, spinning them out, spinning them off, handing them off to somebody that, you know, might think they can do a little bit more, a little bit better with it as an independent unit than being attached to a large organization or firm. And we've seen some of that transition taking place the last several years. I think some of that accelerated last year from what I saw. You know, I work across a lot of different verticals. You know, there's wound care and there's durable medical products, there's implantable products, neurosurgical stuff, spine, interventional pain, all kinds of different things. But I think one thing I've seen the trend is some of these bigger companies just opting out entirely out of certain business lines that they've been in, traditionally and historically for some time, which creates churn
Yes.
because some of those reps don't, or employees don't want to make that transition over to the new organization as it's been recreated, or they just don't have seats over there.
Yeah, I was just going to say before the thought left my mind, the jobs that are typically available now are a little different than what the majority of the workforce has been trained for or been used to or accustomed to over the last, let's say 10, 15, I hate to say 20 years, but let's just say 10 years. The role of, for argument's sake, a sales rep or an account manager in the medtech space has kind of gone in two different directions. It can either go extremely clinical or it's getting more into that just account or C-suite level sort of system selling. There's not a lot in the middle anymore. And again, there are no absolutes. There's certainly the traditional roles that are still available where you're kind of a mix between being a clinical salesperson and getting to write contracts and doing business and truly negotiating. But I feel like the two extremes are sort of more common, which roles might be very clinical or they might be detached from the clinical and be more of what we remembered as corporate accounts or system selling or national accounts roles. And there's not a lot in the middle anymore, it seems.
Interesting observation. And I think I do see some of that with the clinical roles that, are becoming even more clinical. A lot of times there's less pay associated with those.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of times they're hiring folks that are brand new to the industry that they can get, at a premium in a sense versus hiring someone that's very experienced and has a lot more skill sets, but quite honestly may not be as jazzed about doing the roles that exist now. I don't know. I think that's going to get into part of our discussion down the road here in this conversation around that, because I think,
and that's right. You took it out of my mouth. The startup world, I think that's where the fun opportunities are that really marry everything together. That sort of observation that we've had about it being one extreme side of the spectrum or the other are typically at more of like the named or branded larger companies.
Big box,
correct. But in the startup environment or even medium-sized companies that have gone commercial, those positions are extremely coveted, are really great opportunities and great jobs, and they absolutely require both sides of the fence. So that you nailed it.
Yeah, there has to do more, I think, too. And I think, as we look at, the types of folks that are attracted to those kinds of opportunities, they typically want to do more. They want to do a lot. And you're going to wear a lot of hats at a small organization. And is it sales? Is it marketing? Is it commercial access? Is it reimbursement? Is it this? Is it that? And sometimes in a lot of those roles, it depends on the day. What you are. Are you professional relations? Are you a physician educator? And, you're really nimble and you're playing a lot of different roles, whatever the situation serves up or the situation that you created in order to move the business forward. That's what's important, is what, is the end result and the objective and you being able to do and your willingness to do what it takes to, and what's required to get across that goal line. Those are startup environments.
And a lot of times you're asked to join before a product is fully approved. A lot of times you're going to join some of these smaller organizations and do a lot of BD and do a lot of seed planting or be attached to a couple clinical study sites and work with the physicians who are working with your company on the clinical trial and learn and see how things are working and begin to build sort of a clinical demand before there's an ability to really sell it commercially. So again, that's where that kind of ability to do both or really every part of the job comes in. Although it might not be commercial yet, you have to be a clinical resource. You have to also know how to and be able to work with outcomes and healthcare economics and reimbursement and just understand how all the little points of the commercialization process are going to come together there.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a great observation. And I think in times in a lot of these roles, where you're hired a year before commercial release, there's very limited resources there too.
And there's risk.
And there's risk. The thing I hear from a lot of clients that are startups, or let's say even, earlier, they're not a startup per se, they may be fully commercialized, but there's still a huge market with no competitor. Looking at someone from one of your traditional big boxes, are they going to be okay with working here with limited resources? Or are they going to get frustrated by that? If there aren't all the same processes that they have at one of these companies that really facilitate the sale, facilitate a lot of different things for them and make life a lot easier, we don't have any of that, or we have very little of that.
That's right. I've heard, different clients over the years who have been exactly that, say a smaller company who may not have brand recognition and frankly isn't even commercial yet. The good and the bad of working with a big box, let's say, I'm not going to name names, but just a large, let's say, publicly traded medtech company is no matter how much sort of window dressing you may want to put on the role or being out in the field, a lot of times it's just you're pulling through off of a contract. You are basically a shepherd or a steward for the technology, for the product at an assigned group of hospitals or for a state or for a couple of states, but generally it's going to be for a smaller area. And the demand is there. You are there to maximize the demand. The awareness is there. You are there just to keep that name in good standing and perhaps improve it, certainly. And that's where people make their mark is by, continuing to grow and move the needle. But the second that individual leaves to go somewhere else, by and large, another person's going to come in and replace them and generally at least hit a certain baseline. There's always going to be cream always rises to the top, and there's always people that are performing at a high level year after year after year, and perhaps more so than their peers. But by and large, that baseline of demand is going to be there oftentimes. Again, there's always differences in what kind of a product it is. Is it a commodity? Is it something that is required for every, let's say, knee implant? The following 50 pieces of technology have to be used during a knee implant. It's just a question of who works at those companies at that time to bring those products through and get the case done, right? And then with some of these smaller companies we're talking about, they're still trying to figure out, and they're meeting and solving a problem that perhaps physicians or hospitals didn't know they had yet, right? Or they knew they had it, but there was no solution yet. So that's really where the sort of the fun is. And that's where a lot of the top performers oftentimes want to find themselves.
Because they want to test themselves, right? They want that challenge. Can I leave the nest and can I go somewhere where, I'm not waved back just because of the company name on my business card?
Yeah.
Where I didn't inherit a book of business already. And then, yes, make incremental improvements to that and grow that. But can I start something from scratch in this geography?
Yeah.
Maybe where I don't have physician relationships already to leverage.
Right.
Where I'm going into a completely new specialty and now I'm selling disruptive technology and I have to, sell to physicians where there's mutual accountability between us. I'm going to do some things and doctor, you're going to do some things. And I have made these commitments and my company made these commitments and you sir, are making commitments too.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have a quarterly meeting, if not more regular than that, about how we each are fulfilling our commitments to each other in this mutually shared accountable process.
Yeah.
That's where I think sometimes you can see reps who they may have the physician relationships. They may have had them for a while in that market. But if they've been in more of a service mode to those doctors, now they're selling something. Yes, it's sold to that physician specialty, but now you're challenging physicians to do things where you weren't before. You were happy that you had their business and your company could do some things to help you grow that business. But now you don't have any of that.
Yes.
And you're having to sit there and challenge physicians that you may have known for a decade or more, right? And they don't know you like that.
Yeah, this is like with technologies that are going from 0 to 1, or where it's a sort of situation where the technology may be an absolute, no questions asked, first to market game changer and better for the outcome of procedure X, Y, or Z, right? It could be a companion diagnostic, it could be a companion sort of imaging modality, but it's not necessary to do the procedure. So when you're commercializing something that is not necessary to get the procedure done, but makes the procedure better, safer, or more sort of predictable outcomes, that's true selling and problem solving. But in today's economic climate and with the way insurance is and with the way reimbursement is, there's untold pressures. I mean, it's significant on all sides of the equation. And sometimes it just doesn't matter, if what you have is better or going to help the outcome of a procedure, if insurance doesn't cover it, or if enough physicians don't want to add something new to their arsenal, it's hard to get that real uptake.
Yeah. But people still gravitate towards startups.
Yep.
Why? What's the draw? There's a magnetism about it. There's an excitement. There's a draw.
Because you can actually change minds. You can actually change behaviors. And that's what so much of what was going on, again, not to date ourselves, but let's say 15 years ago, 20 years ago, so much was, I hate to say new, but there was enough new technology and the way the economics of things worked. Physicians and hospitals and everyone was willing to really try new things at scale. And now it's just the headwinds are much stronger for that. But to your point, who gravitates towards it and why? It's people who are tremendous relationship builders. They can build trust. They're clinically sound. They're sound from a business perspective and from a contracts perspective. They understand the healthcare economics part of it. And they can actually change behaviors and get a hospital and get some thought leaders and then perhaps nationally and then globally impact outcomes in patient care. And people get really excited and jazzed about that. And those are really the coveted opportunities out there. And frankly, those are the companies that gain the most from partnering with people like us, because since there are so many individuals out there who are, let's say, quote unquote, open to work or who are in transition, just because there's 1,000 people or 100 people or 200 people who might send a resume for a job at one of these companies, it doesn't mean that they have the sort of subjective or softer skills or the ability to thrive in that environment. And that's where we come in, especially now, because there's so much noise and static out there, and there's so many people that we work with that we'd love to be able to show opportunities to, but there are less opportunities objectively. Like there just are less jobs out there right now. And then these good jobs that we're talking about with these startups that are changing the world in different ways, those are going to be coveted.
Yep.
But really only, 5-10% of the people that are out there really might be dynamic in that role and might fit for that role. It's just how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's two things I hear, and I'm sure you hear some version of this when you're dealing with startups too, is number one, we got to make the right hire. Every position matters, especially given the size. And, it's not a 10,000 employee company. I don't know, 500 reps in the field. It's, sometimes 5 to 10 reps in the field. And the other one is speed. We really need a quality hire, but we need to get this person on board. I hear that a lot as well. And I do think, to make a small advertisement for the kinds of work that you and I do, I had a case in point. I had a call from a client today, tough market. They're going to need a rep there. And I looked and, in the past year, I've filled 5 jobs there in that market. Mm-hmm. And it's not a super big market. It's about what I would call a medium-sized market, a notoriously tough market to hire in. And so I look at, and I say, okay, there's roughly 20 people that I know of that interviewed in this market within the last year who were interviewing for similar types of companies that this company is recruiting for. So that took all of maybe 10 minutes. It took a lot of work on the front end, let me tell you. But I just think that's the speed of which we can get dialed in on a market, especially a market that we worked 5 times last year, filled 5 jobs in that market.
Would you say that any of those 5 people would fit into that 6th opportunity, or would it be a completely different kind of DNA kind of a person?
It's interesting. Of the people that I placed, and then of course the other candidates who interviewed, my clients tend to look for similar things, irrespective of previous specialty that the reps called on.
Okay.
So they're disruptive technology sellers. They're builders. They like building things. They like new things. They like the challenge of starting from scratch where there hasn't been something built before. They have the big company experience, so they got exceptional training. They have that pedigree, if you will, that foundational pedigree. And then they took it and they went off and they said, okay, I'm going to spread my wings here, and they like that challenge. And they know, the people that have done this before know so much about how to have the economics discussion, how critical it is that you know how to answer reimbursement questions. You don't hand that off to a healthcare economics person. Maybe super tough questions that are boardroom style questions, where you bring in somebody, okay, fine. But the block and tackle, and even a bit above that, they can do that. They know how to market stuff.
Yeah.
They know how to build patient referral processes.
Yeah.
Again, irrespective of specialty, that's what they do. They're experienced players. And for 5 jobs, you got to figure the X factor over that. We're dialed in. And I know that's similar for you too.
Yep.
We run these searches a lot. We run them all the time. And I think these folks are not hanging around looking to apply online somewhere. They don't apply online.
That's the key right there. And that's what I was going to say is if you posted the job and just sat there and reactively said, okay, here's our candidate pool, that typically does not work.
No.
And that's where I hate to say where we come in, but it is sort of where we come in, or where a good internal talent acquisition and recruitment team comes in. But a lot of these organizations that we work with certainly don't have
they don't have those resources. Yeah.
They just don't.
Yeah.
So it's a hard time out there, because a lot of clients that I have worked with recently, they'll always initially try to do it themselves, and that's fine. And I always say, you will make a hire, or you can make a hire, but they have to sometimes learn themselves that it may not be the right hire. They might have to go through a little bit of pain at first before they finally need to or want to work with me.
One of the reasons I think that is, Scott, is because when they do it themselves and they're a smaller organization, typically their reach is not very wide. It's 1 or 2 people. Some of them applied online, or somebody, word of mouth, they know somebody. You see this sometimes with clinical positions. There may have been an absolute gem that they never saw, didn't talk to. And then the person gets in and they don't know necessarily what the job was that they were interviewing for. They didn't get necessarily all the preview. And that's not malicious. It's just this is what we do. We're problem solvers, right? So then it's a bad hire, which is costly to an organization if it doesn't work out, or they just don't like the job. They didn't know what it was and they're gone. To take that problem solving motif, you and I were talking offline. I had a client that had posted on, I think, LinkedIn or something like that. And they got licensed chauffeurs and gardeners and good people, but not good for that job. And they just kept waiting and waiting. And then it was delayed several months because they had paid money for this posting and they just were not getting what they needed. And that at what point, and I know you've stepped into these situations before, I filled the job in 2 weeks.
Yep.
And that's not because it's magical. It's just hard work.
Yep.
We have a huge network that's not on LinkedIn. We have all kinds of different ways to tap into a market, and we solve problems, just business problems. You got to solve them fast if you can.
I almost say, I hope you don't have to work with me in a strange way. Like maybe it works out, but if it doesn't,
yeah,
you and I, or we know how to do this. And the way I typically start a conversation, especially for one of these startup or 0 to 1 new concept companies, is I'll talk to a candidate and tell them what the job is not, and then almost let them self-select in or out. You have to start by just having an honest, transparent conversation and say, hey, this opportunity is not this.
Right.
And if they respond in a way where it's like, I'm glad to hear that, then it's going to be a good conversation. But you can't go into it just, blindly trying to I hate to even use the word like selling a candidate or selling someone on an opportunity, because that's how you don't serve your client well.
Right.
And you're not helping the candidate either at all.
Yep. Exactly. Yep. There are jobs where you're talking to someone and they say, well, I really want to be a sales rep someday, but that's not at all what the client will hire. They don't want a sales rep. They want a clinical person.
Right.
And they never want a clinical person that wants to be a sales rep. There's just clients that have that very clear delineation of roles. And the sooner you come to that understanding, the less everybody's time is wasted.
Yep.
And you just move on. You just say, hey, this is not going to be fit for you.
But
you're a good fit for somebody else. Trust me. And I hope to facilitate that, but not for this.
But it's hard not to keep going back to this fact, which is it's a different world that everyone is operating in right now, whether it's you and I as a service provider, whether it's the companies trying to hire and grow, or whether it's a candidate that is currently looking for a new opportunity or in transition, or someone who is in a perfectly stable and good job for themselves right now, but who might want something more out of their career.
Right.
The companies that are hiring, no matter their size, there is this sort of almost false sense of comfort or security that, oh, there's all these people that are going to apply to an opening, like you said, and you can have a master electrician who's tired of being an electrician and wants to get into, some kind of electromechanical, medical tech sales or what have you. Like that's going to take up just the time and bandwidth of a system of having to deal with that candidate through a process, or it just clogs everything up, and we can help kind of cut through that and provide some clarity. I know that's a very kind of baseline example, but even for a VP or a C-level opportunity, if a company is going to just post that online and think that they're going to get the best VP or C-level or director level candidate out of that, it just doesn't work that way. Like they may make a hire, and there's a chance that it might be the best hire. There are no absolutes in anything, but 9.9 times out of 10, there's an entire world out there that can be unlocked by someone such as ourselves proactively going into it.
Absolutely. We live in the information age. The question is your information getting to the right person?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And there has to be energy behind that. It can't be passive.
Right. No, absolutely. And the person applying online blindly, let's say they show up, you don't know anything about them. Nothing do you know. And that's where I think the other beneficial thing is typically, you and I have been in this long enough to have placed people multiple times, or placed people who know people that we might be wanting to consider that are referrals, or, have direct observables on the person. There's just more that comes with, I think, our candidates than, just somebody that you don't know that randomly showed up.
Or at the very least, we can say, here's what the job is not. Are you sure you want to look at it?
Right? Yeah, that's big. I think that's big because I picture company rep that's in a good position. Would they like to make more money? Sure. Would they like a little more excitement in their life? Sure. But in the totality of what they do day in, day out, there's not as much risk as there is going somewhere where, hey, it's make it or break it, run for the border.
What would you say is the single most common or largest sort of differentiating factor between someone who is built for one of these startup or 0 to 1 technologies where you're really building it from scratch, and someone who is a top 5%, 10% performer, but perhaps needs to be in that scenario I mentioned earlier where the demand or the proof of concept is already built in and they're a steward of the technology? What would you say is a key differentiator for you, maybe subjectively, for those kinds of candidates?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I think there's two that come down to it, at least initially, that I think are really, really important to know whether this is right for someone or not. One is, I was going to say intellectual capacity, but I think it's more intellectual curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
You got to learn a lot of stuff, and you got to learn it really fast, and you got to keep learning all the time. And a lot of medical reps would say I do, but at a startup, it's different. The world changes very fast. You are driving a technology conversation, and you may be the only voice in that market. And so you have to learn continuously, not only about your product, but about ancillary procedures and doctors, not just the doctor that would be doing the procedure, but maybe other referral doctors. And you're constantly thinking about how to build, not only procedure volume, but you're the voice of your company and you're representing them. So you're the marketing department in that market. And so that's one, is just this. It's not necessarily intellectual capacity. Most medical reps are very, very intelligent people, I think. But it's the intellectual curiosity part. Your way of life is continually learning. You like reading articles in journals. You like that stuff and you dig into it. You don't just do it because it's part of your job. You do it because that's who you are. That's one. I think the other thing is your level of motivation to succeed has to be on overdrive because it's going to get tested a lot. You've got to be resilient. You've got to have something in front of you that you are not only up in the morning, but you're up late too. These are not normal jobs. No medical device job is a normal job, but the startup world is different even beyond that. And I think we synthesize information in this job because I hear so much from managers about why people did work out, why they're amazing, why they're mediocre, why they're not going to be in the organization much longer. So I'm synthesizing lots and lots of conversations here, right? But I think that level of, people call it different things: energy, motivation, desire, drive, determination, grit, whatever. It's something that's extraordinary in the best.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And you see that when you're around them. I'll be at NANS here in a week or two. And I meet all kinds of great people. I see old friends and all that stuff. You know, it's phenomenal. But the level of, I don't want to call it intensity because intensity's kind of got a bad connotation. It's not that. It's just the level of energy that it's above and beyond. They believe in great things and they're trying to achieve great things. I think maybe that's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
Those two things, I think, coupled, are essential in my experience, and the very best have them.
I tend to focus in on the drive thing, but it's more a question of what drives that individual. And some people are driven more towards, I hate to say immediate gratification or, numbers, or, hey, this month we did this, or this quarter we did that.
Right.
I feel like in these startup organizations, you have to be, first of all, a great team player, and really everyone is sort of pulling on the rope in the same direction together. And you have to lose sort of the territoriality mindset and realize, hey, the CEO of this company, or the chief business officer, or the other account directors that are my peers, we're all going to be in these facilities and accounts and institutions together representing the technology. So it's people who can really sort of globally look at things, strategically look at things. I don't like saying strategic. I feel like that's sort of an easy buzzword to say, but people that aren't territorial, right? You have to be a team player, and you have to be driven by almost an abstract goal of the company succeeding at large, and not your quote unquote territory or region per se.
That's a great point.
You have to almost be selfless, right? And driven by making that change or solving the problem versus, traditional metrics per se.
Yeah.
Now, everyone's measured by certain metrics, but you also have to realize that at some of these organizations, especially if it's pre-approval or pre-full commercialization, your metrics might be setting up a study site and being there when it's enrolled properly, and making sure that working with the clinical team on making sure the study goes off without a hitch, versus, hey, I sold X number of pieces of capital, or we moved X number of our consumables or disposables through our capital system. Like, it really has to be a bigger picture view.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love one of the words you used, generosity. And in that context, we're talking about someone, if they're having success, they're sharing it.
Yeah.
They're sharing what's working. I think there's a lot of learning. I know there's a lot of learning that goes on in the early days in the field. Yes, we have a message and a direction, but we're sort of collectively figuring this out together, and sharing best practices and sharing what's working as fast as you can is really, really important.
Yeah.
And the people that are givers and have a generous mindset like that and want to see success replicated, not just for themselves, but for everybody else, because we're all in this together, especially a small company. Those are people that are just so valuable, right? And a lot of these traits go hand in hand. Not all of them, though, because I have had folks get rejected in the interview process because they were too much of a lone wolf.
Right.
They knew they were good. This is a good, talented person. This is someone who's built for a lot of things, but for this particular situation, the manager said, I just have a feeling like they're going to guard information. I just have a feeling like they're not going to be willing to share. They're not going to help train people in. They're not going to talk about what's working because there's this feeling they kept getting that this person was very, very individualistic.
Yep. I mean, I pride myself on the fact that the overwhelming majority, I track this. I think it's in the 90 percentile of individuals that I recruit and attract and ultimately are hired by clients of mine stay with their organization, assuming, all is well and the organization continues to be a going concern for over a year, right? Like they stay and they work. But in the times that they don't, and in one case I'm thinking of in particular right now, the individual came in and it was a commercial role. It was one of these BD sort of half the country, help us get this technology, help get the awareness out there, help drive a couple clinical sites. The individual turned out to be extremely territorial and couldn't handle other members of the organization jumping in on video calls or email chains or the communication process with them, like could not handle it and did not play well in that environment. And we realized really quickly, oh my gosh, this is not going to work out. So I got wind very quickly that person was not going to be there for an extended period of time, let's say.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate.
It's unfortunate. It happens.
It does. And we really try to minimize that through the interview process and getting to know candidates and certainly knowing our clients and being honest and saying, hey, here's what this job is not. But, sometimes people, despite our best efforts, aren't honest with themselves.
Yeah.
It's not that they're not honest with us or with our clients. They're not honest with themselves about what they're looking for. They think they like it. They think they want to do it. But then the second someone else from the company wants to talk to their customer, they can't handle it. And that's really a no-go zone for these kinds of organizations.
Absolutely. No, that's a good point. And that's kind of what I was starting to think about when I said, as reps think about, and I obviously a lot of my focus is reps, but if they are thinking about making this change from an organization that is larger and all the things that go along with being larger, some frustrating, some really good, about making a change into this world, that's where it's so important to know yourself and know your frustrations, things that frustrate you easily and things that you're built for. Some of this, there's no way of knowing until you do it. But I do think, like you said, being honest with yourself about what you like and what is needed or what's required for you to work effectively is really, really important.
And that's where you and I tend to know what other organizations, obviously that aren't clients of ours, are built in a similar structure. So people that are at those organizations would conceptually fit with our client. And that's where, tying back what we were talking about 10 minutes ago or so, you tend to not have access to those individuals who are working, who are doing well at another similar sized or similar sort of business model organization. You don't have access to them if you just are going to post something and reactively wait for them to come to you. Like it just very rarely works out that way.
I mean, it works for organizations do it. So there must be some effectiveness with it. When I worked at a large big box, we did it. I will say there were certain recs that had 500 applicants. And even if there were good ones in there, you're spending all day dispositioning candidates and moving bits of information around. Things may have gotten more effective as of late, but it's I've done that role. I did that role for half my career as an internal TA person. I know that role very, very well. And that's part of our conversation here is steering it toward how to be an effective partner, when to use us, I've been called in on markets as wide ranging as Hawaii and Alaska and filled positions in both. There are just certain geographies, San Francisco, for instance, that are just extraordinarily tough for everyone to try to fill. And we have had success there. But our world, a lot of times, we're much more effectively used as a sniper, if you will. And there's a certain type of client. I think that the way my business has evolved tends to be either early stage or somewhat medium-sized companies, maybe with no competitor and a huge market opportunity, where they still need these kinds of reps. That's where a lot of times the job posting stuff doesn't pay off for those clients.
Nope.
They need to call in a specialist.
And it's just, again, it's become a little more, I think, difficult to prove this concept because there is the false sense of security of there being so many applicants for opportunities, and it can be fool's gold at times. Again, you can absolutely make a hire. 100% you can hire someone out of that pool. And to your point, it can also be a great hire, but a company can't scale or build, especially in certain niche functions, whether it's a specialized commercial hire or sales hire or something in regulatory affairs or clinical affairs or economics and outcomes in HEOR, where those are really specific, tight talent markets that you're just not going to have access to. And again, I don't want to have us talk about COVID and working from home and all that, but the talent marketplace is also so much more diffused now.
Yep.
There's certainly companies are able to, and people want to work out of offices when they can, but there's also this huge world of people who can be based remotely now. So when you're talking about a search that now is not based on a geography, but rather, the whole country or the whole world, there's a lot of there's a lot of stones that can be looked under, for talent.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
again, it requires outgoing energy versus a reactive sort of posting or waiting for someone to come to you.
Sure. And coming out of that, you see things that you hadn't seen before, and we're still seeing things. I never had people ask me if I ever recruited for part-time medical jobs before, but I've had that. I've had people approach me who are in job share situations where both of them were working part-time, and they kind of came as a duo. They said, we like this arrangement. It's a flexible work arrangement. I mean, there's a handful of situations at least out there in the medical device world, where they're working in job shares.
That's a new one to me. I just learned something there. I haven't seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. But it makes sense when you think about it, like how hard it is for employers to find really good people that will represent them really, really well to the face of the customer. And yet this person only wants to work, let's say, 2 days a week, and the other person's willing to work 3 days a week. And they're going to do the job and they get along great. I'm not saying these are salespeople. These are typically clinical positions, right?
So like a per diem, almost like a locum model. And yeah, sure.
Yeah. Or part-time. I don't know. But yeah, absolutely. And I've had in the past, let's say since COVID, people in those situations approach me and say, we'd both like to find something new, but we come together.
Wow.
But I haven't placed anybody like that, but there's just things that came out of that whole thing that we all lived through in 2020 that you never saw up until these days. And I think sometimes it caused people to just realize, hey, I've got some time here on this earth, and while I'm here, I want to try to structure this situation that's optimal. And I think a lot of people are making that choice.
You just got existential there on us.
Sorry, man. Yeah. Well, you get into all these conversations, you do too.
That was deep.
Yeah.
That was deep. That really reminds me of I guess now that you're saying they're for clinical positions, the concept of per diem work in the locums world. I mean, my firm actually has a very large healthcare practice where they recruit physicians and nurse practitioners and every sort of healthcare specialized talent. I mean, again, from neurosurgeons through clinical techs and anesthesia techs, which are unbelievably coveted individuals. And, they'll say, yeah, I'll go to Alaska. To your point, you mentioned Alaska. I'll go to Alaska for a month.
Sure.
And then after that, they're in Miami.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other world. I haven't seen it yet in like the med tech clinical specialist space, but it sounds like you have.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's so many different situations going on. It's crazy. We've been all over the board here in this conversation.
I like it.
But Scott, it's always good to have you on. Anything big in terms of New Year's resolutions for you or big New Year's goals for 2024?
I think I want to inject some of this conversation into the conversations I have with candidates, frankly, because a lot of the time you and I have spoken about this offline as well. We spend a lot of time talking to individuals who are on the candidate side of the equation, who might be in transition or out of work. And the one thing that I've done in the past, and I really want to make sure I do this year when I have those conversations, is to remind them that even though you're looking for a job, make sure that you are really honest with me and with yourself about what that job is, like what you are looking for. Don't just take a job or don't just apply to postings because it's a job, but really, decide, do you want to look at these sorts of organizations we've been sort of talking about today, the smaller to mid-size, where you have to be this sharing sort of multifaceted tool, or do you want to, kind of focus in on, hey, they have a product, I'm going to come in and sort of manage that demand and manage these relationships, but where the demand is already built in, like where are you best? What do you enjoy doing? And what are you best at? And try to really focus your efforts there. And I just to, provide a little value, I think, to individuals who are in transition, rather than just saying, hey, nice to meet you, send me your resume and I'll see what I can do. I might kind of just add that extra wrinkle of not counseling per se, but just that almost warning or caveat to really be intentional about what you do next, because the market is different. There are less opportunities. There are more people looking for opportunities. And you want to make sure that when you do secure that next job, that it's one that you really are honestly excited about and want to do.
Good words. I can't say it better. I'll let that be the final word, my friends. This is Scott Platoff. Scott, where do you work if prospective employers are interested?
The name of the firm is Howard Sloan Executive Search. We're based out of New York. We have offices in New York, Chicago, and South Florida. And we focus on the life sciences space, or at least my division does. So that's anything from obviously medical device companies through biopharma, biotech, cell and gene therapy, the instrumentation space, which is huge, CDMOs as well, and CMOs and CROs. So anything that's within life sciences, medtech, biotech is what our group does, from the C-suite through high-level individual contributors and high-level commercial and sales talent.
One of the best.
I appreciate it, Jordan. Thank you.
Scott, thanks for being on.
3 times.
Yeah.
Let's make it 4.
Thank you for joining us on the Chase Medsearch podcast. I hope that you gained some helpful insight from today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and give us a like on your favorite streaming platform. It really helps grow our audience. For more information on Chase Medsearch, visit our website at chasemedsearch.com. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, I'm Jordan Chase, and this has been the Chase Medsearch podcast.